the way the field of marketing is changing. It's changing within months. It's no longer about 5 years or 10 years. Within months, the whole landscape changes. One fine day, I get a call from my chairman saying that, hey, we're getting the South African cricket team on loan for 6 months. They're visiting India, do what you want to do with them. And we actually cracked a campaign which is called the Play the Host campaign, right? That also got nominated at the Abbeys, in fact 9 awards at the Abbeys, which was a very clutter-breaking campaign. Creative mode has to be on. You cannot not create. That's something as a marketer you cannot afford to not create.
Welcome to yet another episode of the Slow Marketing Podcast. And today I've got with me Rachna Prasad. Thank you so much for joining us, Rachna.
My pleasure.
Quick background about Rachna. So Rachna is a seasoned marketing leader with over 3 decades of experience. She started her career at an agency and spent almost 6 years there. Later on, she moved to join global brands like Amex and MetLife. From there, she joined Oxygen Wallet as a CMO, and post that she joined another global B2B SaaS company called Vinculum as their CMO. And now Rachna works with a lot of companies, consulting them, works with a lot of VC firms, helping their portfolio companies, giving services from a firm which is called The Outside Edge, another interesting name from a marketer. So Rachna, great. Thanks for coming for this podcast. And let's start with a quick look at your career, right? I mean, especially the early days. So tell us a bit about your career, how it started.
Okay, so I think, so first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to this podcast, Neeraj. In your introduction, you made there's a slight change in the introduction, so to speak, because I didn't start my career with the agency, which is Ogilvy. Ogilvy happened after 5 years of my, career having started off. My first stint was with media, which was with Bennett Coleman.
Oh, right.
So I was selling space at for the Times of India and Economic Times at the Bahadur Shah Zafar office. And it was after my, when I took a little time off after the baby was born, when I came back to work, that's when the agency life happened. But of course, most of my learning with respect to marketing essentially happened at Ogilvy. And because that's really the ground where you learn everything. It's like if you're servicing an account, you just learn the 360-degree concept of marketing. Right. And so I spent around 5 to 6 years. When you are with the agency, you are constantly looking for, you have an aspiration of working for brands, right? Because that's like the next career upswing that you can bring into your trajectory. So I always aspired to work for a brand. And I first joined Aviva Life Insurance for a year and then moved on to Amex. Amex, because it was one of the brands at that point, I thought, if I have a job with Amex, I think I can retire from there because there's no better place than Amex. Yeah. It was also one of my clients in Ogilvy, so we used to see it very closely. And I thought the culture was just phenomenal. The work, the kind of things that they were doing was absolutely path-breaking. There was a lot of learning which was coming from the West with respect to communication and stuff like that. So Amex was Amex and then MetLife. I think there are 3 pivotal points in my journey. The first one was when I joined Ogilvy. The second pivotal point happened when I left the entire MNC work culture after having taken on whatever I could absorb from that experience and took a plunge into the startup world. And the reason for taking that plunge was also very interesting because I was a traditional marketer up till then. And I wanted to get into the digital space, but somehow already put in around 10 to 15 years of service. And people were not willing to bet on me for digital because I didn't have any exposure on that. And one realization which I think most marketers at that point had, traditional marketers at that time had, was that if you don't take the plunge, then you are anyway of no use, right? You need to know digital. So the only way I could have done that was if I joined a startup world where you were given a free canvas and you could take on what you could. And Oxygen was actually that because I was actually told in my interview that we don't have a real role for you, but you can carve out something for yourself. at that stage of my career, that was one of the best brief that I could have got, right?
I think that was also a bold decision.
It was a bold decision, I
To
agree.
be able to take up a job where you don't have
a brief, you don't have a fancy office, and it was really pushing your boundaries to come into getting out of your comfort zone. But digital understanding was very critical. It was becoming very apparent. I had given interviews for a digital role, and I was getting rejected, right? So it's really important to take that kind of a plunge sometime. And the second pivot came when I moved from Oxygen to, so all this while essentially B2C. And then I don't know how and why, but I don't have an answer to that till date. But I joined Vinculum, which was completely B2B. And I actually thought that it won't be too different, but essentially it was a different answer altogether, right? So it wasn't a soft landing. It took me 1 year to really figure out, what it really takes. So that was my third pivotal point. The first one was Ogilvy, the second being Oxygen, and the third was this. But there's one common theme that I find here, which kind of stayed, throughout my journey, which was at every given point in time, it's important for us to do a reality check, because number of times you feel, oh, you're in good space, you're getting a good salary, you've got a cushy job, your bosses love you. But, you really need to do that, question yourself at every stage saying, am I employable outside? It's great to be here, but am I employable? And that's a very hard-hitting question. And not an easy decision to make when you are looking at taking raw lunch. So,
actually, I mean, in one of my early podcasts, Rachna, one of the guests, he talked about how it's important for marketers to be curious.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I think the common theme that you're talking about, it's also a lot to do with curiosity, to always be able to adopt what's happening outside and making sure that, you are ready for the next big thing. You are always employable. Right?
Yes.
So moving on, Rachna, I mean, you spent quite some time on the B2C space, right? At Oxygen, you spent almost, I think,
6 years.
6 years.
6 years.
Right. And I think Oxygen wallet happened at the same time as Paytm, right?
Approximately the same time, yes.
Approximately.
Yes.
So you were essentially competing with the
Yes,
Paytm.
I was very much. Yes.
How was it like? I mean, Paytm, today we know where Paytm is with its ups and downs. But tell me a bit about
So I think, you're absolutely right. Paytm had already become a brand name.
Yeah.
And we were a challenger brand, so to speak.
Right.
And so there were pros and cons to it. The pro was that a lot of category education Paytm did for us because they had the funds and they were able to do that. So when we launched the wallet, we did not necessarily have to do too much of category education. People knew
Telling people what wallet.
Yeah, exactly. Or you didn't have to say, oh, aise karna hai, you're going to do this. So that piece had already happened. But the second piece, which was the tough part, was that you don't have that kind of an unlimited budget, right? You cannot do things like, sign up, credit money into your wallet upon sign up and stuff like that. Those are things that we could never run. Those kind of shops we could never give to a customer. But what it also meant was that you had to then become very innovative because you still had, wanted to adopt a critical mass.
You had to deliver.
You have to deliver, right? So that led to, and I think that's another big learning in my marketing career. And I'm reminded of that book, which I think one of the marketers has written, Marketing Without Money. And I think it's such a relevant book. Most people found it relevant during COVID times, but I think it's something which every marketer should read.
Right.
Okay. This is by Jesse Paul.
Yeah.
But, so when you don't have money, what do? How do you stretch your money? Right? And there were so many instances where we had to do a lot of innovation to be able to do that. Yeah. And I have several stories of having been able to do that. Our launch in itself was with a partner, which was giving us a certain kind of a software into the thing. And then it was, we did a digital launch. It was because we could not really afford, a very full-fledged, high decibel. Yes. So we did a digital launch and it was a digital concert. And it was called the Stroke of Midnight campaign.
And that's an award-winning.
Yes, it's an award-winning campaign and I'm very proud of it. and how we went about doing it. It was done on a shoestring budget. But what really worked was the kind of agency that we worked with, which was a boutique agency, and the ideation and the thought process, and the agency knew that we were working on a limited budget, and how is it that we can stretch it as much as possible. How can we extend the campaign over a period of time through organic means and stuff like that. So I think that was we won four awards on that in the Abbeys. So that was one campaign. The second one I remember was because Oxygen had a joint venture with a South African company. One fine day, I get a call from my chairman saying that, hey, we're getting the South African cricket team on loan for 6 months. And they're visiting India. Do what you want to do with them. We don't need to, there was no, it wasn't a sponsorship the way sponsorship works. But it was more in terms of they've been loaned to you. You can use them the way you wanted.
You must have thought either you have heard it wrong.
Yes, exactly.
South Africa or
exactly. And the funny thing was that there was a message saying you need to fly to Durban or Johannesburg for this thing. And I was like, where is the connect? It took me almost like 48 hours to understand the connect of what can I do with this, right? As a B2C player who is targeting the Indian digital savvy youth, to sponsor a rival team which is visiting India made no sense.
Right.
Okay. But sometimes you're pushed into a corner and you have to make the most of it. And so the agency and we just brainstormed, and we actually cracked a campaign which is called the Play the Host campaign, right? That also got nominated at the Abbeys, in fact 9 awards at the Abbeys, which was a very clutter-breaking campaign. And how to make use of a resource which otherwise you would perhaps never have gone out to really work with. But it was a phenomenal experience, and we managed to get such phenomenal volumes of downloads without putting any money into it. Without saying, okay, fine, download with 25 rupees as a cashback. Without giving cashbacks, we managed, downloads. So I think those are things which are, so when you have a limited budget, you tend to innovate more,
right?
In my view. Yeah. If you have budgets in abundance, then there are 100 ways of spending it. But when you have limited budgets, you essentially look at how well can you optimize that to get the maximum benefit.
One of the marketing groups that I'm a part of, recently there was a conversation that there should be some part of the budget that you should keep for experimentation. And I'm assuming those would probably be the companies where they have a lot of budgets.
Yes.
Right? When at a shoestring budget, you can only experiment with what you have.
You are constantly experimenting. So that's what. But I'm glad that those things happened, because for two reasons. One is, of course, that nothing is impossible. Like as a marketer, you start thinking, how can I do a campaign which is without funds, right? Or how do I do? There's the certain basic principles of marketing which you start questioning because you're pushed into a certain situation, like in the South Africa piece. But you can turn it out to your advantage, right? And I'm so glad that those experiences happened.
Yeah.
And it actually put me in very good stead during COVID times, because at least one thing I can say is that I didn't panic during COVID. We continued to do very healthy marketing at Vinculum, despite the fact that budgets were, constrained and stuff like that.
So I think Vinculum was your first B2B role.
It was my first B2B.
Now, that was after spending almost 2 decades in marketing.
Yes. For a brief period, I was the CBA, the Chief Business Officer for Oxygen also. After my CMO role, I was, so that was like more a business role. But when I was, working with partners, etc., to help scale platform, because we'd done a change in strategy for Oxygen Wallet and stuff like that. But B2B marketing was actually happened at that time. Yes. So I learned the ropes of B2B.
So Rashmi, tell me a bit about it. I mean, after spending so many years in B2C, right, switching to a B2B role and, doing marketing for a SaaS company, that too in a space we've worked together on Vinculum, right? Omnichannel retail and, software that supports that. That was also a new concept.
Yes.
There are not many solutions out there.
Yes.
So how did you went about it, and how was your approach different in regards to B2B marketing at Vinculum as compared to your previous experiences?
Yeah. So I think when I joined Vinculum, I first thought, how different will it be? I think I've done 2 decades of marketing. Consumer yahan bhi hai, how different will it be? And, I've done 2 decades of marketing. I think I can manage it. But it wasn't that easy. In fact, it took me almost a year to really understand that the toolkit is very different.
Right.
Okay. The fundamental principles of marketing remain the same, right? But the toolkit that you use to get customers onboarded is very different.
Yeah, things like white paper and case study must be new for you.
Absolutely new. And even things like analyst relationships, right? How can a Gartner Magic Quadrant impact your inbound story is something which Connect had never formed in my mind when I joined it. Right. But it was over a period of time that I understood the magic of that. Then working very closely with partner brands who help you scale. The partners come up with some funds. For example, AWS was a great story.
Right.
Helped us scale without having to organically scale. And they have a very strong motion which helps their partners to, their companies to, the SaaS companies to, and they have partner funds essentially. So if you collaborate with them, there are limitless opportunities, right? Of course, it requires far more rigor. The process is slower. In B2C, what happens is that you spend money, you start seeing the magic very fast, right? But in B2B, the process is slower. You have to work harder. And if now, after so many years, I can actually turn around and say that you require, a lot more brain power in a B2B space than a B2C space. Because there is so much that we've already got to know about how B2C works and, what tools we have, what media vehicles we have. And we have so many, agencies and, fraternity which will tell you, how things are working. In B2B, there is a limited space.
I've been a marketing student.
I
did my graduation, post-graduation marketing. And I don't remember being talked about B2B marketing.
Yes.
Even all the stories about great advertising, great marketing campaigns, that was always about B2C, right? So again, I think you only get to know about B2B marketing when you actually do it.
Yes, and in fact, I remember that when I was doing when I took up this B2B thing, a lot of my marketing friends turned around and said, "Why would you do something like this?" Right? And why would you? It's not even glamorous.
Exactly, it's not.
So it's not glamorous, right? But at that point itself, one thing which I had come to know is that the way the field of marketing is changing. It's changing within months. It's no longer about 5 years or 10 years. Within months, the whole landscape changes. If you have to be relevant, you have to constantly keep pushing yourself and experimenting with different things. And in B2B marketing, there are very few players. There are very few marketers who are in the B2B space. And there are people who are, and if there are, then there are people who are doing work like, an IPM marketing and stuff like that, right? You don't really have too many B2B marketers in this space.
It's absolutely right, Rachna, because we work with a lot of B2B companies, right? We large IT services, enterprise companies, and we have been looking to hire people who want to do B2B marketing, who want to do product marketing, right? And it's so difficult to hire. Right? Again, maybe it's not glamorous, so maybe there's no toolkit available.
Yes, it's actually the glamour piece because most people feel, B2B mein funds nahi milenge, kya kar sakte hain, what can you do really? You're absolutely right. When I look at now that I'm a consultant and in any of the portfolio companies that I consult and we are looking at setting up a team, getting people with a B2B mindset is very hard.
In fact, majority of your consulting companies are now B2B. Right?
Yes, in fact, I was going to say that I'm so glad that I did that B2B thing because that is when the idea of moving out on my own and taking up the role of a fractional CMO really, I would say, it kind of, the universe conspired, and it as an idea, it came up into my mind because I realized that we have there's a tech revolution which is happening in India, right? India is now making great products thanks to
for the world.
Thanks to Freshworks, which has managed to completely help us position ourselves like that in the global space. But there's so many tech startups now, And all of them, amazing founders building great products.
Yeah.
But when it comes to marketing, they need support. They need help.
Yeah.
And it was around that time that I also got into the, Ivy Cap portfolio, I panel as a mentor. And I got exposed to some of the challenges that the founders face.
Yeah.
Okay. Very simple things.
Hmm.
And those are things which are true to, real life. And in fact, and they need help. And given the fact that there's a huge yawning gap in terms of demand supply for B2B marketers. Right. And then there are real challenges which the tech companies are facing. It just turned up to be the sweet spot for me to start the outside edge and cater to, these startups. Most of in fact, 90% of them are essentially B2B currently. And I really enjoy working with them because the kind of thinking and the kind of strategy that you need to, each one is unique, right? The moment your ICP changes, everything changes, right? So that's what has been very interesting.
Personally, for example, we would have worked for almost 200 brands in the last 7 years. Yeah. And obviously, we worked with more B2C brands than B2B brands. But personally, I love working on B2B.
Yes,
brands, right?
Yes.
And in the end, for example, Creative Street, when we market ourselves, we are also B2B, right?
Yes.
We're talking to businesses, CMOs, where they are the stakeholders.
Yeah.
So one of the learnings that I have is how important it is to build that relationship with the stakeholder.
Yeah.
Right. Obviously, you do that in B2C as well. So that fundamental that you're talking about, that doesn't change much, right? But what are the different? I really look at it from the first principle perspective, right? If XYZ is the stakeholder for you in a B2B setup, right? Then how can you really influence his or her decision, right? How can you build that relationship with that customer, right?
Yes.
And what all things can you deploy to do that? Right?
Yeah.
So fundamentals largely remain the same. So, and there's also a call out to people who want to do great in marketing. I think we should definitely try B2B.
Yeah.
And we are hiring at Creative Street. So if you're interested, you can definitely apply.
No, and the fact that if you are a marketer, a budding marketer, please don't discount B2B marketing. Yeah. It's actually, there's a lot that you can learn.
Yeah, exactly. So moving on, Rachna, I think we spoke about some great campaigns that you've done at Oxygen and then the work that you've done with Vinculum, right? I want you to talk about a bit about the consulting companies that you work with currently, right? And we were speaking about the recent campaign that you did for one of the EV companies. Right?
Yes.
If you can just tell us about that, that's also an interesting story.
So I think this company that I founded, which was in January 2023, which is called the Outside Edge. My model is that of working like a fractional CMO, which is like, I'm not a full-time CMO, but I work with their teams to create the complete marketing strategy, code GTM, as well as help them execute. So it's not a consulting role. I actually don't like to use the word consulting because consulting still has a very arm's length view of things. Yes. I am pretty immersed with your businesses, which means that, I work with the teams, with the founders very closely to look at a business challenge. So what you are talking of is a company called Refin, which is a fintech platform. 6 years old, doing some amazing work in EV financing, which leads to commercial EV adoption. Mm-hmm. And so they have a very B2B model, which is that they've been extremely successful and they've got a very large footprint across the country. But it was always via their dealer network or OEM partners and stuff like that. I think one of the biggest things that we wanted to do was create the mission of the company has now evolved into building a sustainable mobility revolution within the nation, right? And with the government policies and Niti Aayog's net zero mission, it becomes even more imperative that founders like, the startups like Refin, they actually come together, collaborate, and they create this whole ecosystem which leads to sustainable mobility. So with this renewed mission, it was very important that we don't just have a transactional relationship with our OEMs and dealers. So we started, and of course, there are three stakeholders. There are OEM partners, there are dealers, and then there is the end customer who is actually benefiting, right? How do I bring the three together? And how do I create a story where we are able to bring forth or give the complete narrative of sustainable mobility to them in one shot. So we did the Jagriti Yatra campaign, which is actually one state at a time. So we're picking up states which have shown the maximum promise. And we call it the Rev Up MP or a Rev Up UP and stuff like that, where we essentially saying we were seeing good traction coming from the ground, but we just need to give it an even greater push.
Right.
That campaign, while we originally looked at it as a press meet, but the additional agenda we had was to get the OEMs and the dealers under the same roof.
Right.
Okay. And what really worked was for us to have the OEM founders sitting on the table and seeing the kind of work a Refin is doing in that state, and coming up with very interesting insights with respect to how the market is actually maturing, having their point of view with respect to EV revolution. Why is there a promise with respect to EV revolution? The dealers talking about on-ground challenges, and every stakeholder coming on the same table at the same place and talking about what they can essentially do to create this and make the adoption easy. Very simple thing. One of the dealers turned around and said that the difference between why people are adopting EVs is because it's almost like a comparison between prepaid fuel and postpaid fuel.
Right.
So, like for example, if I am buying fuel today for my ICE vehicle, it's essentially prepaid fuel.
Right.
Whereas the reason why people move to EVs is because it's postpaid fuel, right? So insights like these it not only helps Refin, but also helps our dealers and OEMs to understand how the market is reacting to some of the initiatives and propels us to move forward. So
you also get a lot of dope for your next marketing initiative.
Exactly. And a lot of, conversations happen. Now, one of the things that also happens is it's a B2B thing. For me, customer testimonials is very critical, right? When we are meeting customers on the ground, we are shooting them. We are actually understanding what's happening on the ground. Why is it that the person bought a three-wheeler?
Yeah.
He has a good job in a factory. Why did you move to a three-wheeler? Things like that. So getting the insights and the nuggets, these kind of customer insights and important nuggets of information about this helps us as marketers to refine our narratives.
Yeah.
Okay? Because customer understanding finally, first principles.
Yeah.
If you don't know your customer, then how can you?
Yeah.
So I think Jagriti Yatra is not just Jagriti for the consumer, it's Jagriti for us as well.
Yeah.
For people working at Reflect, because we're just working so closely to the ground. And I'm glad it's making an impact. And we're looking forward to more such pit stops, as I call it. So that's how it is.
No, I mean, that's great, Rachna. In fact, what I really picked from your last bit was how it is also important as a marketer to be very connected with the GTM of the company.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
And this is one question that I always try to ask any new company that we engage with, right? I mean, do you really have a GTM in place, right? Because I mean, a marketing strategy cannot work in isolation if you don't have the right GTM, right? So a lot of time marketers don't really get into, if the GTM is right, can you do anything even for the GTM, right? And then I think marketing comes second.
Yes.
Right. So I'm really great. That.
So I think in many situations, especially for the startup world, sometimes the GTM is not in place.
Yeah.
So it helps you collaborate with the founders to create a GTM strategy. And I think that's actually better because you are then completely immersed in the business. You're not looking at it from an arm's length perspective. You give an advisory. You don't need just an advisory role.
Right.
You're essentially participating in the process.
Yeah.
And I think the outcomes are much better then.
So, Rachna, I mean, you've spent almost 3 decades in marketing, right? If you have to pinpoint 2 or 3 changes that you've seen, from marketing landscape perspective, what has changed?
I think the role of tech, right? From where we started to where we are today, I think every day you have new tools, and you need to be completely abreast with that. That's first. The second, I think, is, I don't know where you might find it stupid, but I find it a little challenging, is after 3 decades of having worked, to work with the new breed of people, which is the Gen Zs, and to be able to collaborate with them.
Yeah.
Their style of working, their priorities are very, very different, right? their approach towards work is very different, right? So I think that has changed, and it's not just only for marketers; it's for everybody.
Yeah.
But I do find that, and the third piece, I think, I mean, I don't think it's about the difference, but I just feel that that's one of the tips that I always give to people, which is that when you are a marketer, don't just be focused on what you are, working on a brief or, whatever that you need to, obviously you need to work towards an objective and stuff like that. But I think very early on, get into the practice of creating something. When you're getting into the habit of creating something which is very different, which has never been thought of, maybe starting a blog column, as simple as that. You are constantly feeding into this whole habit of creating, and as marketers, you need to create, And the examples that I gave you, they came from nowhere, they came from a very tough situation where you needed to do this. But if you have a habit of creating something, then it comes very easily. You will not sit and wait for, okay, when I have the budgets, then I will do this.
Yeah.
Or when the situation becomes better, then I will do this.
Yeah.
Once the company is at a certain stage, then we can do this or stuff like that.
Yeah.
When you are in a creator mode, you are, no matter what the situation, you will always be working overtime to be able to look at, what to do. And I think that has changed. You don't need to, everything is at your fingertips, right? You can actually you could start a podcast just like that, right? Or you can start your own channel just like that. So you have far greater freedom, but far greater responsibility.
But I think I'll also connect this, Rachna, to the fact that I think marketing, since beginning, whenever it was started as a function formally, marketing was glamorous because marketers were always considered to be change makers, right?
Yes.
I mean, कंपनी सही चल रही है, सब कुछ चल रहा है, बट मार्केटिंग वाले से एक्सपेक्ट करते हैं कि यार तुम कुछ अलग करोगे, right? And that अलग need not just be, say, a campaign per se, but you'll also say change the narrative, change the way, say, the office looks, the way we communicate to the internal stakeholders, external stakeholders. So I think that bit is very important for marketers, B2C, B2B, irrespective which industry you're operating in. But if you can't create, like you say, right? If you can't create something, if you can't bring a change, if you can't break the status quo, then I think you're not a real marketer.
Yeah, and also see, on the same note, I would also, in fact, the other day I was listening to something which was saying that, which talked about that ad which was about Vicks ki goli lo khich khich tu, okay? And how did that jingle really come to play? And how is it that even after 3 decades, 4 decades, it still holds true and the jingle continues to do this, to serve well, or the Amul thing, right? So while I'm talking about creating, I'm also talking about the fact that keep it simple. So consistent, right? So creator mode has to be on. You cannot not create. That's something as a marketer you cannot afford to not create.
And hence we are also creating.
Yes, absolutely. And that's changed because it's now become so much more easy to create.
Right.
You need minimal things to create something. So keep that thing on. That's really changed a lot and for the better. Yeah.
So, I mean, Rachna, finally, if you have to advise, say, the young marketers, right, to give 3 pieces of advice to them, what would those be?
I think I can only dip into my experience. And from my experience, I would say what really worked and what didn't, kind of thing. So a couple of things that I would say is don't be too steadfast about putting yourself in a kind of a straitjacket mold, saying, oh, I am a content writer or I am a social media expert, right?
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that somebody would do today. You should be a sponge and expose yourself to as many things. There are so many things that are happening.
That's a great point.
Yeah. Because I think that is the biggest limitation. And, people, I see a lot of young folks saying, oh, but I'm a performance marketer. I can't do content. Hey, you can't be that. Okay. And one of the principles I've always kind of pushed it down as a team with my team as the T-shaped development, which is like a deep domain in one and then having a horizontal experience across different things. So learn martech, learn content, learn performance marketing, learn how Google AdWords work, learn about partnership marketing, all those kind of things. Why limit yourself at such a early stage, right? That's number one. Number two, of course, is keep the creator mode on. So if you're not a content person, nothing stops you from opening your own store on Facebook and starting performance marketing ads or that, just to learn how it works.
Yes.
Because in the digital world, ultimately everything's connected.
Yeah.
You can't just say कि मैंने सिर्फ performance किया है तो performance से खाली किया है. Like you and I know, right? If you do performance, then it also has impact on organic, right?
Absolutely.
So everything is connected. How does it work? That's something which is the curious mind. How does it work? What levers should I push and change which will have what impact? And that is your core differentiator. The more you know that, it becomes very good. In fact, I want to just give you an example. There was one company where, as part of the IV Cap piece, I had to review their marketing. As part of the mentor piece, I was given the task of reviewing the marketing spend and, just to give a feedback in terms of how do you think it's going, and a very objective feedback. It so happened there were time limitations in my turnaround. And I was traveling for an event, which meant that I had very little bandwidth to go through this. So most of it I had done, and then I wanted access to their Facebook and, accounts and stuff. But by the time I got the access, I was traveling the next day. Somebody in the mentor pool, somebody from who runs the mentor pool, he turned around and said, "Don't worry, go for travel." He has a completely different role today. But he said, "I have run ads on Facebook because I started a company long time back. And I know how it works. So let me just go deep dive into the data and figure out what it is like." Right? Now, that is the elasticity that you have built. And that's my advice to people. Who's stopping you to do that? Right?
I think that's a great piece of advice, Rachna. In fact, I attribute a lot to whatever little I've been able to build today with Creative Street to my stint at Oyo, right?
Yeah.
And Oyo, my almost 2 years stint, I did everything from performance marketing. So I've run ads myself, app download ads, Oyo ke app download karwane. Two, I worked with the digital team. I worked with the brand strategy team. We did positioning of some of the new products that they launched. So I worked on such a variety of things. I was fortunate enough to work with Ritesh closely on a lot of, his pet projects, right? I set up the entire ORM piece at Oyo back then, right?
Yeah.
So I think being elastic is extremely important because, again, marketing is so wide these days. I mean, in terms of number of things that you can do, and you can't just be, good at one thing without having to understand everything.
Absolutely.
And as you said, I think that team model that works great. You need to know everything, and then you can be great at one of the things.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the third point would be, essentially, again, dipping into my own career, which is, there's nothing like a comfort zone. I'm good at this.
Yeah.
That day is gone. So if you think that I'm really good at something like this, great, good for you. But tomorrow the AI will take that away from you, right? So you need to constantly keep upgrading yourself, reskilling, which everybody knows. But, to apply that is very, very critical. Like, I remember there was this thing where somebody turned around and said, "Achha, do you know performance marketing?" I said, "Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of learned." "Oh, that's very hard. I don't get into this at all," right? Why not?
Yeah, what stops you?
What stops you? Nothing stops you. And the best way to learn it is you try your own page, you create your own page, and you see how this whole thing works, for it to be. So my advice to people essentially would be that there is no way for you to, the opportunity is everywhere. It's just upon you to take this and be elastic and, take that on. So
that's just one final question, Rachna. I mean, we've known each other for very long, right? And I know you follow spiritualism to a large extent, right? I'm been to Sadhguru's ashram, read a lot of books.
Yes.
So if you have to compare, say, marketing and, say, spirituality, right? Do you see anything which is common or anything that, spiritual can teach a marketer today?
I think there are many commonalities, if you ask me. As a marketer, I think the first thing that I would say is that spirituality makes you look within. Okay. And it essentially propels you to find your answers from within, right? As a marketer, it also helps you build your intuition. Okay. Ever since I have started practicing I have found that I have built that intuition which works beautifully for me when it comes to marketing. There are many times that you will have data, you will have a story, but there are certain things that you will know as a marketer which is intuitive, and that decision, I don't, it's very hard to explain. Like I was actually looking at having a conversation with a team for one of the companies that consult, and we were not able to identify a certain pattern which had suddenly taken off. And we were just scratching our head as to kya hua, why did it happen? Why is it that this pattern has changed? And intuitively, I felt that I think there is a problem with our website.
Yeah.
Okay. Or intuitively, I said this data is completely wrong. It's not making sense. Just go revisit this data. Right? Now, the ability to build that intuition before you take an informed decision is something which I think is the common thing that I can find, because in marketing, like in life, you cannot take a very compulsive decision.
Yeah.
You need to make conscious choices. Even more because you've got there's money at stake, there's reputation at stake, there is so much at stake, right? Just like in your own life, you have reputation at stake. So taking compulsive decisions or making compulsive choices can come back very badly.
Yeah.
So I think building that ability to look within, listen to your intuition, and then take a call which is based on an informed decision. I think there is some kind of a connect there. Yeah. So I don't know whether it answers, but that's the best that I can.
No, I think that's a great answer, Rachna.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for being a part of this, Rachna.
My pleasure. It's a great conversation.
Yeah.
Thank
And we'll be back with more very soon.